For today's video, we are going to be looking at the Lightning type in JLC in 2024 and going over the popular strategies and the best synergies available. What is the Gym Leader Challenge? Well, it's a fun format created by Andrew Mahone. You can often see this at side events of regional and other high-level tournaments. There are a good amount of online tournaments being played on Play Limitless, as well as webcam battles on Discord, and simply it's a fun format, an alternative to the expanded or standard formats that we have in the game right now. You can't earn championship points from the Gym Leader Challenge, it is just for fun, but the gameplay is very different to the standard format, and that's because of these 4 crucial restrictions that we have imposed on ourselves in the Gym Leader Challenge format. The first of which is that you have to pick a type, and your entire deck has to be of that one type of Pokemon. That means we are basically cosplaying as a Gym Leader. The second restriction is that we have a maximum of 1 copy of each card in our deck, excluding Basic Energy. Similar to Commander format in Magic the Gathering, it's been adopted in GLC. It creates some interesting resource manipulation, exploitation, and management throughout the game, and it enables much more flexibility and creativity within deck building, rather than having a 4 restriction on cards where you just put in the absolute staples, maximum copies, and just run with it like you would in a standard format game. Hopefully this also creates much more unique gameplay experience, which is part of the fun, really. The card pool is massive. We can use cards released from all the way back in Black and White onwards, which means we have over a decade of cards to choose from. And finally, we cannot play A-Spec or Rulebox cards in our deck, which means it's all single prizes that don't have a Rulebox. There's also some Prism style like Stadiums and A-Spec cards. They are not legal for play. Notably, you can use Ancient Trait Pokemon as well as Amazing Rare Pokemon, as these do not have a Rulebox specifically. The final thing to be aware of is that there is an active ban list, and you can see on the bottom of the screen the current ban cards. It's a very restricted ban list based on how large the card pool actually is, but this has really been the sort of most problematic cards that have been discovered through gameplay, or overall just create less fun environments for the formats. So every now and then I do recommend checking the ban list just to make sure you're up to date. This typically doesn't change unless there has been a new set released, making potentially new combinations more powerful. So here's a quick cheat sheet of the general staples that you can find in the GLC format. I've tried to compartmentalize these into a few separate categories here to make it easier when you are constructing your own decks. First of all, gusting and switching outs, these are all pretty integral in any deck list, as are the sort of the most premium supporter cards. This combines good draw power with hand disruption, and Versus Seeker being a great way to recover any of these is obviously very powerful. Searching options are integral to any deck in the format just to get your Pokemon into play, and they're actually more premium in this format because, of course, you only play 1 copy of certain cards, so having immediate search options is going to be really important to get your strategy online. Similarly, recovery is even more premium when we only play single copies of cards. If we have a very strong attacker in the deck or a vital piece in terms of your engine, recovering this if it's targeted by the opponent is obviously important. Equally, prize cards are more important to have access to because, again, you can have integral pieces that find their way into the prize cards, so having access to these is going to be even more important than you would think in standard. We have a handful of pretty useful tools. This is just a very short list, but these are some of the strongest ones that we have available. Some nice consistency boosting item cards, and Field Blower, even though it's not a consistency card, is very versatile in that there are some really important tools to get rid of, as well as Stadium Wall, which is rife. There aren't many stadiums on the slide right now, but that's because there are many type-specific stadiums that people will incorporate into their deck list and sometimes can be a big part of their overall strategy. So this is almost always worth including in deck lists. I think it's a very valuable card. We have some good energy searching options, which don't sound like much, but are great deck thinners in general and gives you some nice value. And down here we have Arven and Guzhala. I think these combine to be a pretty nice package that is almost universal. Both Arven and Guzhala can be great ways to not only fill our bench up, but also get them evolved pretty early in the game as well. So there will be a number of archetypes that actually lean quite heavily into this sort of package, having the likes of Tag Call, Pokegear in their deck list to really give yourself good odds of hitting one of these supporters early on, because it can be one of the better starts in the game, similar to going for like a Bridget or Bull Guy style play in the opening stages. It's a bit more DIY, and there are some pieces that could be prized, of course, but it can create some really powerful board states with multiple evolutions ending on your first turn. For the Lightning specific stuff, we do have the supporter in Volkner, which grabs a Lightning Energy, as well as any item card, so it's a small upgrade on Skylar and can help us maybe skimp out with lower counts of basic energy within our deck, knowing that this can be an extra helper here and there. There's a few decent stadium cards in here. Aether Paradise can reduce reduce damage that your basics receive by 30, bearing in mind that if you come up against grass decks, you're also giving them a helping hand. Rough Seas is a really nice one. There are some spread devolve decks sort of finding their way into the GLC metagame because of how good Technical Machine Devolution is. So having Rough Seas inherently can give your archetype some protection against that, which is really nice. And Stormy Mountains is a fantastic searching option, getting your basics out the deck. And as we know, Guzmahala is a really popular engine in many decks right now, and Stormy Mountains giving you help, whereas not giving your opponent help via Artisan, which is like the universal option, is a small upgrade and a boast that Lightning has available. Electric Generator is a solid card. We do have good acceleration already in Lightning, and we typically just rely on the recursion of energy rather than having these really high counts and using Electric Generator, using Max Elixir, those sorts of item cards. But it is an option if you want to have burst acceleration and very aggressive attacking game plans. Electro Power, it's another great boast that Lightning has available to it. This is literally a Leon for the Lightning decks in the form of an item card. Very, very strong option to help you push into a knockout range. Then we have a couple of really nice special energy cards. Speed Lightning, when you attach it, draws you 2 cards. Phenomenal on a energy, as well as Flash Energy, which can give you some protection against the fighting type if you deem that necessary. Onto the key engine Pokemon for Lightning. It may be a little bit limited, but actually there's some really good standout options here. One of the best things that Lightning has going for it is that it has both Electric and Flaffy. They share the same ability, helping you attach energy from your discard pile to your benched Pokemon. Having essentially 2 1/1 lines of this really just allows us to flesh out a strategy around this ability much more likely, because even if one of them is taken out, you'll have the option to evolve into the other, which is phenomenal. And when both of them are rocking and rolling, you have amazing energy acceleration and recovery at your disposal. You do have a Fluffy Pillow Mareep, which might help out in the opening stages. If you happen to start this Mareep, you can leave your opponent's active Pokemon asleep. Sometimes they just can't get around that. You can buy yourself a free turn, which is okay. But the 1/1 lines of both of these stage 1s being 90 hit pointers, so levelable, searchable, is fantastic. You could even use things like Rescued Carrier if you want to have easier recovery for these cards. Really, really great options, which most of our lists will be incorporating. For draw power, the best option is Zeb Striker with that sprint option. You discard your hand but draw a fresh 4 cards. It's actually pretty solid if you already want discard synergy to help with your Dynamotors. It's also in some ways seen as an enabling card, and it's a great way to protect yourself from late game Iono and N, so you can just push through and get some good card draw. Manectric is kind of that one-time use, but kind of combines being a decent drawing Pokemon as well as being an okay attacker. 3 for 100 is an okay rate. It does have free retreat as well, but when you evolve this Pokemon, you can draw 3 cards, and if you're already playing Scoop Up Net or possibly Devolution as well in your list, if you're looking to use like Evo Shock Raichu, for example, this could be a card that you look towards. And then Electrode simply allows you to top up until you have 4 cards in your hand. Not quite as strong as things like Octillery and whatnot, but it still can be good in a pinch. We have the Buzzap Thunder Electrode, which can knock itself out and then provide 2 energy as a special energy card, which is pretty okay. And there might be some legitimate reasons in Lightning why you would want to be behind on prize cards. We have some great users actually of reversal energy and counter energy in this type, and Electrode being an extra means of getting energy on the board is also pretty welcomed. Shinx is a pretty solid line actually. We know that there are some really strong Luxrays and some decent Luxios, which we'll look at in a moment. So having the potential big raw Shinx, making your opponent push their active Pokemon out of the way, is sometimes a nice option. There's a couple interesting Magnazones. There's the Rain Dance option, which allows us to attach as many lightning as we like from our hand to our Pokemon if you want to go down that direction. But there's also another way that you can give your opponent prize cards is the Call Signal Magneton, allowing you to search your deck for 3 supporters after you've knocked out the Magneton. Like I said, there are reasons why you want to be behind in this format with some combinations we can string together, and those combinations can be easily found when you have the option to grab 3 supporters, and even if you lean into Lieutenant Surge's strategy, for example, that could be massive. Or we could have the Dual Brains Magnazone option, which allows us to play 2 supporter cards per turn. And when you're doing that, you can string together some crazy things with Lusamine, Surge, Cynthia Caitlin, all these crazy things. There's so much you can do with the Dual Brains, so if you want to lean into a controlling build, this could be the stage 2 for you. And part of the reason why I'm talking so much about Lightning in control is this Evo Shock Raichu. When you evolve up, you instantly paralyze your opponent's active. With lots of bouncing effects and devolution effects, you can try and use Evo Shock turn by turn by turn, whilst you're using other attacks in the active position, which I'll talk about in a moment, to chain this combination to leave your opponent constantly paralyzed, make them often run out of their escape ropes, their scoop up nets, Guzma, VS Seeker. Once those sorts of cards are diminished, it's quite likely that your opponent will have no more answers to a guaranteed paralysis. So you can entirely lock the opponent out from taking prize cards for the remainder of the game as long as you can maintain your loop, making Lightning actually one of the stronger controlling archetypes available in the GLC. Onto some key attacking Pokemon then. There's actually some really excellent basic Pokemon that we do have available. First of all, the amazing rare Raikou, one of the big payoff cards you get to play in your Lightning deck. The Amazing Shot has a really awkward attack cost of Grass, Lightning, and Metal, but you get to deal 120 to the active as well as 120 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. That's two really good damage output breakpoints. It's getting you through other big basic Pokemon in many situations, as well as targeting oftentimes not just stage 1 stuff, but also some lower hit point stage 2 Pokemon. So it's a huge snipe that can easily take 2 prizes with one swing. If you can try and bulk up this Raikou, keep it around on the board with Fury Belts or Luxurious Cape, and have multiple chances to use this attack, it's absolutely crazy. And with Counter Energy, with Raihan plus Dynamotor plus attachment of some special energy, you actually can get this attack off all in one turn and really change the outcome of a game. It definitely is one of the key selling point attackers in Lightning, especially because there are other attackers in the format which can also add some sniping elements. The Regieleki deals 120 to the active and then 40 to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, so that could set up some amazing shots on some really higher hit point Pokemon, or finish off some things you've already hit with Raikou. We have the early tempo option of Zapdos, that Thunderous Assault, when it moves from the bench to the active, can deal 70 more damage, so it's an 80 for 1, really good rate, can be easily accumulated via Guz Howler as well. You can grab your Stormy Mountains, you can grab your tool to retreat your active Pokemon, and you can grab something like Speed Lightning Energy, so you're also getting a couple cards on top of a very aggressive line of play. So Zapdos is a really good card to kick off with and initiate that prize race, put your opponent under pressure, and start taking out some of their evolving basics is the ideal situation. Tapu Koko is a great free retreat pivot, has a flying flip option which can deal, again, decent bench spread across the board and initiate some pressure, and Electric Ball can chip in as and when. And then Thunderous is another really decent option here, where you have a 140 damage attack for just 2 lightning. Again, really high tempo, really dangerous option. When it's in the active, you're also preventing your bench Pokemon from being hit by opponents' sniping attacks as well, so it can deny some lines of play from your opponent and force them to go through the Thunderous, which is pretty nice. The Gigantic Bulk does deal 90 to itself, so there is some drawback here, but this is a really high damage payoff on a basic Pokemon in this format, especially when you think about the damage mods we have available with Muscle Band, with Electro Power. This could be a huge threat. In the top right, we have some of our best abusers of counter and reversal energy. Luxray itself, of course, does benefit from being behind because that Swelling Flash allows you to put it immediately into play onto your bench if you are behind on prize cards, and the Wild Charge deals 180 and 20 to itself. Again, another great option for you to have higher damage output at your disposal in the deck. And then we have 2 options of Electivire. Both are really solid, actually. The High Voltage Current can be a build-around card for a spreading archetype, as you deal 50 to each of your opponent's Pokemon. It can just be for 1 energy attachment in the best case scenario with reversal. And Electivire, similar thing here, but instead of going for a high damage bench spread, it's all hitting into the active for 180 damage, as long as this has a special energy attached as well. Pawmot is a stage 2, but can accelerate some energy to itself and deals 230 damage. It has free retreat as well, so there are benefits to this card. Some of the highest damage output that Lightning actually has available to it. Raichu and Lantern have very similar abilities. When stuff is getting knocked out, you can gain attachments onto these respectively. The Lantern deals a 70 plus 70 if you choose to discard all energy attached to it, which is okay. The Raichu being the higher damage output option of the 180 threshold, but does deal 50 damage to itself, making it somewhat of a glass cannon. Similar to the Electivire, if we are leaning into a spread approach, which is certainly available with Lightning, we have Raikou, Aleki, Koko, Electivire. You could also look towards some of these other stage ones. Galvantula for 1 energy does 30 to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Doesn't seem all that impressive, but it at least does apply weakness and resistance. This is both a Lightning and Grass type, so you can actually catch a number of archetypes by hitting them for weakness and really pressurizing them early. And Alolan Raichu's Electro Rain option is actually very scary. Discarding any amount of Lightning attached to this Pokemon, and then you choose where to put your 30 damage spreads as you go for each energy you discard. If you're able to just throughout the game accumulate these attachments with your Electric, with your Flaffy, or if you want to go down the Magnezone route, you can have a very dangerous spread attack option within your deck. There is an alternative way to play Luxray. Actually, a few decent Luxrays out there. This is one of my favorite ones, though. The raid option for just 1 energy. When you evolve this turn, you get to do 1 for 160, which is a solid rate. If the Luxray happens to hang around as well, the Headbolt just does 120, which is never a bad thing. Luxio is a pretty interesting card because it gives you an item lock option, and there are some matchups where this will just hard carry carry, I feel like other controlling matchups, sometimes an option to shut off their item usage can be really backbreaking and can really limit a number of archetypes. So Disconnect can swing games in its own right, just based on how your opponent has built their own deck list. So there are reasons to think about having a Luxray line within your deck, just because the power of Luxio can swing a matchup here or there. And then there's also an evolutionary advantage Shinx, so there are situations where you could go Shinx directly into Luxio on your first turn of the game going second and initiate this item lock. So there are situations where maybe the early item lock lets you set up other things in the back whilst you slow down the opponent and deny them of their ball search. And then looking towards the sort of controlling package of Pokemon, we have Regieleki, which is a high hit point basic Pokemon that can get a trainer directly back from the discard pile. And then we have Lantern and Magneton, two stage 1 options, Lantern having the salvage option, which shuffles 4 items from your discard pile into your deck, whereas Magneton puts 2 items from your discard pile into your hand. So Magneton, the more sort of immediate card, but getting less value overall, whereas Lantern, especially when you are using Zeb Striker over and over again, you can get to the bottom of your deck and start using that salvage to recover cards immediately, sprinting back into them, and then playing those cards all in one go. You do have to be a little bit careful about that package, but I'll talk about it in a moment because, spoilers, we're going to be looking at Shocklock in a moment. Let's get into some deck lists then, and we're going to start with kind of the most traditional, most commonly seen build of Lightning. This is a very popular build out there, simply because I know that Andrew Mahone himself is a big advocate of this archetype and does enjoy playing this one quite a bit, where we are really leaning into some of the best basic attacking options that we have. The Zapdos for great tempo, Thunderous for big damage output plays, and Raikou for those spreading lines of play where, like I said, you can go for some pretty cool options here of going for Dynamotor plus Raihan the Grass Energy to Raikou and attach one of your special energy to the Raikou to get an amazing shot off, even if you are level or ahead on prizes, but knowing full well that if ever you do fall behind on prizes, you're a counter energy plus Dynamotor away from getting back into the game with an amazing shot. You can see I do have the Lux Cape in here. I think it's really important that you can survive with Raikou and just get the maximum output from your amazing shot at times. We have the Silent Lab, the Lusamine, to try and make sure that we are getting around the bench protection Pokemon. Also, Parallel City can be fantastic in aggressive archetype like this, where we are aggressively trying to pick off prizes with Guzma and Lysander, using Parallel beforehand, limiting your opponent's options, then taking out other key threats on their board can really hinder their setup. That's kind of the main identity of this build of Lightning, is that you're just setting the tempo very early, initiating that prize race from turn 1 in most situations, and letting that sort of tempo carry you through the game. The next list I have is a little bit different, although there are still some key elements in here. We still are playing many of the decent basic attacking options. We still have the Flaffy and Electric. I still feel like they're fantastic. Zeb Striker is a great drawing option, but you'll see the Electivire has made its way into the deck list. This is the spread Electivire, as well as a 1/1 line of that Magneton. The idea being is that you can still be aggressive with this archetype completely, but you have the Call Signal option at any point to give your opponent a prize, and in doing so, hopefully you can activate your reversal or counter energy to make the Raikou play a little bit easier, or ideally you make the Electivire play with reversal energy that little bit more online, and then you can use that Technical Machine Devolution after you've used a spread play from Electivire, maybe a combination of Flying Flips or Terra Sparks, even weaving in some amazing shots if you had to clear the board all in one go. So it's a bit of a wombo combo, but especially with the Call Signal helping you cherry pick things like teammates and Raihan and whatnot, it actually does come together quite smoothly, and at the very least it's just another option on top of what's already a really consistent and strong shell of the deck. You by no means have to lean into the Devo every single game, it's just an option to have available in certain matchups. And then we actually have the list that I put the most time into. I've really enjoyed exploring how Shocklock looks in the GLC format. The idea being is that you are trying to spam that Evo Shock turn by turn by turn. Like I said, we have Lantern and Magneton as the key sort of stage 1 Pokemon that you can try and spam. Mostly the Lantern, to be honest with you, because once you get towards that bottom end of the deck, just shuffling in those item cards is going to be so crucial. I actually do think the Technical Machine Evolution is a substantial upgrade for this archetype, because getting straight into your Electrode and Zeb Striker and just beginning to cycle through the deck is so important for an archetype like this, that it's trying to work all the way down to the bottom of your deck to get yourself in that perfect loop where you are going to be spamming Palpad, VS Seeker, Scoop Up Net, or Devo Spray. Either one works. Sometimes you weave in both. And then you are going to be working in the Surge, the Lusamine, the Sinlin, as well as other great supporter cards. Professor Churro Scenario or AZ, either one would work here. You have Thornton just in case your opponent does make Guzma plays on either some of your engine Pokemon or on the Pikachu itself or on the Raichu itself. You could go immediately Thornton, Rescue Stretcher, get back your Raichu and still initiate a Shock Lock. There's so many great plays this deck actually has available to it, and with the suite of items that we have, it's actually pretty consistent to maintain a loop of paralysis. Even if things are going awry, you have Robosub, you have Lily's Pokédoll, these are going to be great options in the early game. Sometimes they can even bait out Guzma or Escape Rope or whatnot whilst you're trying to buy time. They also play around Escape Rope if the Lily's Doll especially is on your bench, or it could be an option that you actually Thornton as well into your other things. So these are great bench-sitting Pokemon that do the lot. You actually are able to salvage 4 item cards, then sprint your entire remainder of the hand away and get yourself back out of N/Iono or Reset Stamp range. You can, with the amount of cards that can +1 you, get back into good shape. You can get back always Versaseeker, Palpad, and Scoop Up Net. Those are the guaranteed 3. Then you can either pick Super Rod, Rescue Stretcher, or Special Charge. These cards will get you to 7 total in combination between deck and hand, actually. As long as VS Seeker gets Lusamine, that's a +1 card straight to the hand. Palpad is +2 cards back into the deck. The Scoop Up Net actually isn't a minus because you're picking up both Pikachu and Raichu and rebenching your Pikachu, so the Raichu remains in hand. And then the combination of either Special Charge, Super Rod, or Stretcher, either you're putting 2 or 3 cards back into your deck. Ideally, it's Special Charge, actually, because getting reuse out of Speed Lightning Energy can actually be massive throughout the entire game to make sure you're keeping in your cycle. But the main concept that I want to drive home is that you are able to go really low on deck and hand size and still find your way around Iono and N from the opponent without decking out by just drawing too many cards, because you can +1 so often with the items within your list. You'll notice I've got the Rough Sea Stadium in here. I think this really helps out against opposing devolution strategies. I've recently proxied this one up and I'm having a ton of fun with this and might actually change it for my more traditional Lightning deck that I have built, because there are some great intricacies to this. You can attack your opponent with Belelbra and Bryson and try and hit some resources as you go as well. Definitely a really cool one. It might be a little bit difficult to get other people to play against you, which will be my only hindrance if you are going to be building this deck yourself, but I do implore you to try it out. I think personally it's a ton of fun and quite a viable option for Control in the GLC format. Even though Control has had a number of cards banned, I do still think it has a place, and this archetype still seems viable to me. Onto the overall strengths of Lightning then. You have fantastic tempo plays, that's undoubtable. Zapdos on its own can carry a number of prize cards and get you ahead in a race, especially if you are dealing with evolving Pokemon quite early on with Guzma and Boss's Orders and whatnot. As soon as you get your Eels online, then you're going to have great acceleration for your other basic attacking Pokemon. You also have some great spread attackers. Even though you don't always have to lean into the Raikou itself, just having the option of Regieleki being spammed once or twice in the game can also set up basic and stage 1 Pokemon and really put your opponent on that clock of having to evolve on the following turn. Otherwise, they're going to lose additional prizes and lose the option to evolve into their other engine Pokemon that are on their bench. Another great option is just having space. Because the archetype relies on just a handful of stage 1 Pokemon and then a number of great basic attackers, you have the space to play the likes of Muscle Band, you have the space to play the Lux Cape, the Parallel City, sometimes Hex Maniac. These power cards, which other archetypes don't really have the room for, Lightning actually has that space, that wiggle room to have these disruptive options at its disposal and really put the opponent in an awkward position through the use of tool cards, item cards, stadiums, that sort of thing, which other archetypes simply don't have the luxury to play because they are reliant on so many stage 2 and 1 Pokemon. So the space efficiency of Lightning is really amazing. For weaknesses, there aren't many. I do think Lightning is a very solid performer, but it can lack damage output at times. If your early aggression of Zapdos doesn't come off, if you're having a slower start, or if your opponent just has a number of their own big basic Pokemon, and yes, Zapdos is doing some work, but is sort of chipping into them rather than taking prizes, you can end up being on the receiving end of higher damage output, higher hit point Pokemon that are just sort of wiping through your board whilst you're trying to scramble your way back into the game. And I also think, although Zebstrika is a fantastic drawing option, there are situations where it will be awkward. You might be discarding pieces here and there as you go, simply because you are forced to sprint to dig for other cards like more energy, more stage 1s, recovery things, or crucial supporters, but in doing so, you're removing resources that were in the hand that could be solid, just not at the right time. So there are situations where the Zebstrika can be a hindrance. That's it for Lightning, though. I do think it's a really popular choice because it does play quite aggressively. I think this is one of the decks that plays most similarly to like a standard deck, to be honest with you, because it is just trying to be a good pace setter, try and force the opponent into awkward situations just by taking prize cards, bringing the pressure onto them. There are going to be a number of slower setup style archetypes in this format that simply crumble under that sort of pressure. So if you get a good start with Lightning, you can bully decks off the board. And I think that's why it's such a consistent performer in this format. If you want to learn more about the GLC, there's going to be be links in the description below. There's the official website, Gym Leader Challenge. There's Cardboard Warriors, which is a really useful website, as well as my Cube Koga document with a visual list of the most playable cards in GLC and a few example deck lists from myself as well. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.